Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Living Mythology, I'm proud to bring you Bob Vosseller in Spaced Out, one of our legacy shows. Greetings and welcome, Bob. How are you?
Doing great, and really excited about tonight's episode because my good friend Stephen Lance, who's a authority on not only Star Trek in many ways, because he was in Star Trek the motion picture and in a scene there, and is an actor and a voice actor, and has some other credits that we'll let him talk about later. But he is an authority on the Adventures of Superman TV series. And as we had our program last month talking a bit about the new Superman movie, which I did see and enjoyed, this time we're going to focus on a show that many of us remember and probably brought us into the Superman world as we grew up. And for those that are younger, you'll have a treat of just learning a lot of behind the scenes tidbits about the cast, who many of whom Steve knows or knew rather, and will be sharing many stories with us about that. And with that, welcome, Steve, and thank you for joining us. And I know you've got a lot to tell us. There's been a number of Superman shows. I won't go through all those because we want to go straight into the Adventures of Superman, which I believe started in 1952 as a series, and prior to that, at least one film or two films.
Right. There was a hi, everybody. Hi, and welcome. Thank you for having me. Good to be back here on Spaced Out with Bob and Hercules. Great to have you with me. Thank you so much. The Adventures of Superman. Actually, let's go back a little bit, Bob. First, there was the comic book, 1948, 1938. The Adventures of Superman started way after that. So it started out with the comic book, the action comic Superman, which was produced and drawn and illustrated by Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel. Now, from that, it got pretty popular pretty quickly, and they decided to make a radio program. The radio program was called Adventures of Superman, and it starred the voice of an actor named Bud Collyer. Now, Bud was famous to us, maybe, or growing up if you grew up in the 60s, he was famous to us for having been the host of the TV show To Tell the Truth. It was a game show. He used to wear a little bow tie. And the reason he got to do the voice for the cartoon was he had this kind of a gravelly voice, a little bit like that, but he was able to make his voice a little bit smoother when he was Clark Kent. And he would say, this looks like a job for Superman. And he would change the voice on radio. And when they went and did the animated cartoons after radio, they brought Bud Collyer back again for the Fleischer animated series, which, by the way, Bob, if you have not seen them or if your viewers have not.
I love the Fleischer cartoons, but I also have been watching. This summer has been like the Superman summer for me. I have been watching the 1966 Filmation.
Oh, yes.
With Bud Collyer, who I remember more from his doing.
Yeah, he did the Filmation, right?
Yeah, in live form. But it's even really cool to watch him in the storage room going, "This is a job for Superman," and you literally hear the voice inflection change.
That was what's
visual. It was
so great about
fantastic,
him. Yeah.
and it's a really good cartoon. It stands up.
There were several. So he played Superman in that Filmation cartoon, Bud Collyer. Yeah. So he did the voice of Superman and Clark Kent on radio. Then he did the voice for the Fleischer cartoons, which the animation, they're the same folks that people want to know that did Popeye and Betty Boop. And they did that marvelous motion picture, Gulliver's Travels, which in the old days used to be on Channel 11 every Thanksgiving Day. And they did that wonderful animation with Superman, which included something called rotoscoping, where they actually filmed actors moving in a studio, going through the motions that the cartoon was. Then they printed individual frames from the film, and the artist traced the movement and then drew in the
Yeah.
characters. So they move very realistically. You can see that in Gulliver, particularly when Gulliver is walking and the prince and the princess. The little cartoon characters, the Lilliputians, were very cartoony, and that's how they had the separation between the
Yeah.
cartoon characters, which were Lilliputian, and the very realistic Gulliver, the princess, and the prince. Well, they did the same thing for Superman with the Fleischers. It was just marvelous, and you should watch it. And then he did the voice for the Superman in 1966 for
Right.
Filmation.
Yep.
And then they made the Batman Superman hour. And whenever Superman was in, Bud Collyer did the voice for Superman. Then they later had the Tarzan Superman Adventure Hour. And when Superman showed up, he would again do the voice. So Bud Collyer was the voice of Superman right through the 60s, even though other actors had played him in between, meaning that the the motion picture, the first motion picture was with George Reeves. But right
Yeah.
before that, they did two 15-part movie serials with an actor named Kirk Allen. And
Yes.
Kirk played Superman in Superman. And then in the second serial, a year, almost 2 years later, they did one called Atom Man versus Superman. And I always thought that was interesting. If I were Superman, I'd fire my publicist because Atom Man got top billing in the serials. And those were 15-part serials, and they're wonderful. You ought to watch them. But what was interesting about those movie serials is they had not yet worked out a inexpensive or safe way to have Superman fly.
Hmm.
So do you remember what they did in those serials, Bob?
They animated them.
That's
They
right. So
they had
so
him up and away, and all of a sudden
Right,
you would
right. So
see.
Kirk Allen would say that, this is a job for Superman, and Kirk Allen would run behind a building, behind a rock, behind, he'd disappear for a second, and then an animated cartoon of Superman would fly on the screen for a couple of seconds and land behind another rock or behind another building, and then Kirk Allen would come out again. And it was a little silly, you might say it was a little cheap, but the stories were so cool that when you watch it,
You didn't mind. Yeah.
you don't mind. You don't care. And they're all available on YouTube. In fact, they have a colorized version of the Superman
Oh,
with Kirk
really?
Allen.
Okay.
So you need to watch that. So they made those two serials, which featured a Lois Lane played by Noel Neal. Then they decided they were going to do a pilot for a television show, and they were looking for an actor. Going back in 1939, before the Superman serials, there was a movie made called Gone with the Wind. And that was the movie, I think, was nominated for 13 Academy Awards, Bob. And out of the 13 awards, it won 10. At the opening, now Clark Gable starred, as Rhett Butler, and Vivian Lee, was Scarlett O'Hara. But there was an opening sequence and a couple of other times in the movie where Scarlett was being wooed by a couple of handsome twin brothers, the Tarleton twins. One of
Mm.
them was Fred Crane with bright red hair. The other Tarleton twin, they didn't get real twins. They got two actors that kind of had similar, facial features.
Mm.
The other actor was a new actor trying to make it in the business, Bob.
George.
George Reeves.
George
And they
Reeves.
they dressed them identical. They put identical puffy red wigs on them, and they were Scarlett's suitors in at least two scenes in the film. Once on a porch, and then I think at a picnic. And one of them was George Reeves. Well, the producers decided that George would be a better Superman than Kirk Allen. And Kirk made the two motion picture serials, and then they hired George Reeves to do a B picture. So it was a feature film. It was the first Superman film, but it was also only 68 minutes long or 58 minutes long. I think 58. It wasn't even an hour.
Oh, wow.
But as a B picture, that still could, well, fly. And
Yeah.
the film did well enough for them to be able to sell the television series. Now, in that, Superman and the Mole Men, by the way, was the name of the motion picture. Lois Lane was played by an actress, Phyllis Coates, and they went to series, and Phyllis Coates continued in Lois Lane for the first season of the TV show.
Yeah.
George Reeves, of course, was Superman. And after the first season, she decided to leave for multiple reasons. No time here to go over it. But Phyllis Coates left Adventures of Superman. By the way, Bob, it's not The Adventures of Superman, although when you speak about it, we usually say The Adventures. If you look at the on-screen credit, it's always Adventures of Superman, not The.
Adventures of-
Right. The Andy Griffith Show has the word The in the title,
Hmm.
and the Superman did not. It was Adventures of Superman. So after Phyllis Coates left, they did something that must have been thrilling to Noel Neill, who had played Lois Lane with fairly long hair in those Superman serials with Kirk Allen, and brought back Noel Neill as Lois Lane from season 2 right through season 6.
And thankfully, they shortened her hat, because
They,
in
they
the
shortened her.
serial, my God, when you see the picture of her as Lois Lane with Kirk Allen, her hat looks ridiculously large. But that was fashion then.
Yeah, and also she had very long hair back then too.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just kind of neat. And one of the things about the motion picture, the Kirk Allen serial, and the first season of the Adventures of Superman, is the color of the costume. Now, you have some things there that are black and red, but what do we really know as Superman's costume color, Bob?
Well, we know it as being blue and with the big S, and of course the as we refer to, the red underwear outside the costume. But filming back then required some alterations, which
Right.
I
So we know Superman from the comic books, from
yeah,
seeing it in the comics,
blue,
that he
yeah.
had a blue outfit, blue tights,
Hmm.
the red
Blue boots. I mean red
blue
boots.
red boots, the red trunks, and a red cape, and of course
Yep.
the red S. But if you film those colors, red and blue, together in black and white, the color contrast, it's a grayscale thing, and you can go
Yeah.
back and look at this online. It's fascinating. The blue and red are so close in the grayscale that there's very little contrast between the color of the S and the costume. You can't really see it good. And the trunks also kind of blend in almost to the
Yeah.
to the tights. So what they did back in the black and white days is they got him a gray costume with a brown cape, brown trunks, brown boots. And when you watch it, you see the very strong contrast between Superman's, the emblem. By the way, it's not a logo, folks. It's an emblem or an insignia. And the Superman insignia, the red and the red S on the insignia, the red cape and the trunks and the boots. And you say in your mind, because you saw him in the comic books, that that's red and blue, and you just accept that. But it was really gray and dark brown. So being a fan of the black and white first 2 seasons of the Adventures of Superman, I dressed in that monochrome. I'm wearing the same thing that George Reeves wore. If I step back a little bit here, Bob, it's a double-breasted jacket, because George Reeves always wore a double-breasted jacket. And it's a gray shirt with a purple tie. I didn't
Oh,
have brown, and a blue jacket. But if you were to turn this in, and if you want to take a screenshot, somebody out there, and take a picture of this in black and white, you'll see a very nice contrast between the gray and the what would be brown. It's a dark purple, which is very close to the brown, and you see that contrast. And that's what they did for the first two, the motion picture, obviously the Kirk Allen show, the 2 serials, the motion picture Superman and the Mole Men, and then for the first 2 seasons of Superman in black and white, he wore the gray and brown costume, and then season 3 through 6, they went to color, and they actually had, there's still, when they made the blue and the red, there were still in the first season, season 3, they didn't think there was enough contrast. They actually had, over the series, 3 different colors of blue to kind of balance out on television. what the red and blue looked like, because color TV was very new back then. So if you watch some episodes, you might see Superman's red and blue in season 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the blue changes slightly. And one's very dark, which I think it was too dark, and then it got a little bit lighter. And you could look for that. It's just, fun to do.
I always like the episode of Adventures of Superman where Jimmy stumbles into the secret closet and you see a whole bunch of Superman costumes.
Well, it wasn't Jimmy, and that is,
Oh,
by the
was it
way,
Jimmy? I thought it was,
it
but
wasn't Jimmy.
okay.
The actor's name, the character's name was T-Ball, like in pool, and he was a criminal that broke into Clark Kent's apartment to just rob something. He didn't know whose apartment it was, and he accidentally leaned on the closet and the door opened up, and there was only at that time only in that episode there was one costume. In another there was actually multiple costumes, which was interesting because
Mhm.
Superman's mom back in Smallville really only made one, but it was
Yeah.
television. So T-Ball accidentally opens the sliding panel on the wall and it becomes a closet. And he sees Superman's costume in there and he takes it, wraps it up, and he goes to give it to a couple of criminals and says, "We now know who Superman is." And it's one of the few episodes. They were very film noir back then, those black and white, and people actually got killed in a number of those episodes. T-Ball gets shot and dies, and
Mhm.
the people that he gave the costume to also has. I don't want to give it away. It's a great episode. Superman, Clark Kent goes to the closet and sees the costume gone, and he doesn't know what to do with it, and he hires a detective, and the detective says, "Okay, Kent, what did you know? I'm your friend. What did you lose?" And his name was Candy, which, by the way, the character of Candy, Candy, as the detective friend of Superman, a
Mhm.
PI, private investigator, was in the radio series. So that
Oh,
character was brought back from the radio. And he says, "Okay, Clark, what'd you lose? I'll help you find it." "I can't tell you that, Candy. Look, Kent, we've been friends for a long time. You called me for help. You lost something. You got to tell me what it is, or I can't help you find it." He says, "I guess I'm gonna have to let you go, Candy. And thanks for coming over." And he didn't know what to do because he didn't want to tell Candy that he lost the Superman costume. Uh, so Candy didn't help him find it. Clark Kent eventually does locate the criminals, and you see him run up the stair in his Clark Kent outfit, this outfit right here. He runs up the stairs of the apartment building, smashes through the door, and then slugs somebody that was there so they wouldn't see who he was. And he
Mm.
told the criminals, "I don't know what to do with you." He took the costume, changed, I guess in a bathroom, and we don't see that. And then he flew them to the top of a mountain where there was a cabin. He says, "I'll bring you food and water till I figure out what I can do with you. You're the only people that know who Superman is." And of course, they didn't believe he was going to come back, and they decided to climb down the mountain. It didn't work out well. Both
Didn't
of
go
them,
well for them. Yeah.
yeah, she was wearing high heels and she started to slip and grabbed him, and they both
Oh.
to their death in the Adventures of Superman. So those first two seasons, that happened
Yeah. Much
more than
darker.
one time. I love those film noir episodes. I love them.
Yeah. And as much as I know, and especially you, and we'll get into that, loved Noel Neal as Lois Lane. There was something about the Phyllis Coates Lois Lane that I really liked because she was much more like the Fleischer Superman animated Lois Lane, a tough cookie who, not to say Noel Neal couldn't be at a time, but she was just generally more lovable, more softer, and had a
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that you say that because when I was a kid, my sister and I used to watch The Adventures of Superman, and she's younger than I am, and she would always say, who's on today? Is it the nice Lois Lane or the mean Lois Lane? And Phyllis Coates being the mean Lois Lane. And when
yes.
you're kids, that Noelle was more likable. As an adult, when you watch those episodes, Bob, you nailed it in describing. Yes, she was much more like the Fleischer Lois Lane, Phyllis Coates, and they were great episodes. They were really terrific, but the scripts got a little bit more kid friendly and
Yeah,
cartoony,
yeah, and we
and
went they
and
they drifted more into science fiction,
yeah,
and
and
MeTV is airing them on over the weekends, and including they replaced Kolchak, the Night Stalker, at midnight with the Adventures of Superman at midnight, which is very strange since they went from Svengoolie to Batman to Star Trek to the Adventures of Superman. And the
It's
one
probably because
so this past weekend was the one with Chuck Connors in color, which
terrific.
with his donkey.
Sylvester J. Superman, that was one of Chuck Connor's earliest film roles.
Yeah.
I think he did a couple before that, but he was a former baseball player and I think also played basketball for a while too. He
Hmm.
was Sylvester J. Superman. That was a color episode from
Yep.
from Skunk Hollow County, if I
Yes.
recall. And
Yep. You're
the
right.
episode was a couple of criminals bet that their aunt or their friend could make a better lemon meringue pie, and whoever could prove that there was the bet, they'd get an unsuspecting, unbiased person down at the diner to taste them and say who had the best pie, and they would get 50,000. The $50,000 that they had stolen, was put away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and what happens is uh, they wouldn't, Margie, the lady that made the pie, wouldn't give it to him, and she had an ad in the Daily Planet: Superman need your assistance, and had planned for Superman to fly the lemon meringue pie to the ice station where her fiance Steve, of all names, was working. And then the man who read the newspaper ad was not Clark Kent. That day, a guy named Sylvester J. Superman, who happened to be in town from Skunk Hollow County, read it, went over to Margie's house and says, "It says here, Superman need your help," and he went and helped her out. It's a great episode, and because of that episode, I once told my Aunt Sue, who lived next door, that I loved. I'd never had a lemon meringue pie, and I didn't know what it was. And she said, "I'll bake one for your birthday," which was coming up. And
Um,
she did, and she did it the next year, and the next year, and the next year, and the next year, until I grew up and moved away. And to this day, my family will either bake or pick one up. I get a lemon meringue pie on a pink plate, just like Margie,
uh,
every year.
that is
So that episode is very special to me, Bob.
now drifting back to Lois Lane. I think you were responsible for something that even Clark Kent and Superman may never have done. You had a night that you got drunk with Lois Lane. Tell us about that.
You remember that story, Bob? It's funny that you ask that because drunk is maybe an
Maybe
overstatement.
two, yeah.
Okay, so what happened was I don't drink really. Okay, maybe that much on a Sunday morning, but they don't really drink. And I was the public relations and the booking person for the college that I went to. I went to Uppsala College in East Orange, majored in English, and I was on the committee where we would book entertainment for the college. And I would get all the press kits from all the people that wanted to speak. There were musicians, there were poets, there were writers, and sometimes we get actors or actresses. And one of them, that kits that came in, was a blue press kit with the Superman insignia in color. And it opened it up, and it was Noelle Neal. And she was making appearances at universities if you wanted to book her. And I think it was like $4,000. And I went to the dean. I was a senior at the time and had just been named senior class president. And of course, they wanted to have at college a hoity kind of a guest. They had Celeste Holm and they had some poets. But the dean, Dean Scudder, who really liked me and I loved him, said,
Mhm.
"Steve, as your graduation gift, I'm going to let you book Lois Lane, Noelle Neal, here at Uppsala College." And I put together a collection like you have, Bob, of all my Superman memorabilia, and we put it in a glass case in the library so people could look at it. I had recorded every episode, all 104 episodes, on cassette, and I used to hang a microphone that I scotch taped to the TV set, and it hung down right by the speaker of the old CRT television. And when I did that,
Mhm.
my mother was not allowed to vacuum or make phone calls. They had to be quiet for that half hour when I recorded The Adventures of Superman. And I had them all on cassette. And the library put them behind the desk, and they had tape recorders, and you could actually borrow one of the cassettes
Oh,
and
wow.
listen. This is before VHS, kids.
Yeah.
This is
Oh,
VHS without the pictures. And people would come to the library, and they couldn't take it out of the library, but they could go up to the listening room and put in the cassette and listen to an episode of The Adventures of Superman. And I did that. And this went on for several days, maybe a week. And then the day that Noel Neal was coming into Newark Airport, back then, Newark Airport, now Newark Liberty. I hate that. I hope I never have to say that in a film. Newark. Newark. She came in, and I had run around, got everything ready on the campus. I had not eaten breakfast or lunch, and then had to drive from East Orange to the airport in that town and wait for her to come off the airplane. While we were waiting for Noel to come off the plane, a couple of other interesting people came. Lee Majors walked off the same plane from
oh,
California
yeah,
before Noel
that's
did.
great.
He must have had a first class seat, and he came up, and I got to meet Lee Majors, and
Very
Jack
cool.
Cassidy was with him, and I met Jack Cassidy, and they signed autographs, and then a little while later, she must have been in coach. Noel came off, and there was Noel Neal, and we took her luggage and got her in the car and took her to the college, to the hotel, actually to the hotel, the Holiday Inn where we were putting her up. And they said, well, let's. She said, well, how about having a drink? She's on a different time than we are. No, forget now. Now it's like 9 o'clock at night. I have not had breakfast, lunch, dinner, a snack, nothing, because I was going to meet Lois Lane.
Yeah.
So she says, how about drinks? Now, back in college, I was a real big drinker. I would drink whiskey sours because they were
Ooh.
sweet, and I would have a whiskey sour. So I ordered my whiskey sour. She had a margarita, and we sat there and talked, and I was with some other people. And apparently, they tell me this, and I do not remember this. Apparently, she was talking about how, celebrities can do things to help underprivileged or people that are in
Mhm.
need, just by their namesake, they can get funds or money, money donated for a good cause. And she was doing that uh, for handicapped children, I believe. And apparently, as she told the story, and I'm watching Lois Lane, and I'm so excited to see her, she's telling the story, and I laughed. And I laughed at the story because I had not eaten in 24 hours and had, a half of a whiskey sour in me. And I didn't know what was going on. And I laughed at that story. I have not had a whiskey sour, by the way, since then. Never. I swear. No, no joke. I really haven't. Uh,
Uh,
but that was when so I wasn't drunk, falling down drunk, but the alcohol buzzed me after not having had anything in my stomach for 24 hours. And I didn't really, uh, I wasn't able to focus on the story. And she told this very apparently lovely, poignant story about the work that she was doing with handicapped children. And I laughed, and I didn't mean to, and I'm sorry, Noelle. And I think she knows that.
yeah.
So that's my getting drunk with Lois Lane.
Of course, her association with Superman didn't end with the Adventures of Superman. She did have a cameo with young Lois and on a train in the first Superman motion picture with Christopher Reeves. And she returned again in Superman Returns, if I'm not mistaken.
You're right.
With Lex Luthor marrying her for her money. And I think
Uh,
that
she was she
last
was
week.
in both of those films, but I'm glad you mentioned the first one that she was in, which was
Yeah.
an interesting scene. The scene, for those of you who just to jog your memory a little bit about what we're talking about, in the scene when Superboy, he's still Superboy in Smallville, and he kicks the football, and the football, goes, 2 miles, and he runs, and the train is going down the tracks in Smallville, and you see Superboy running alongside the train, and there's a little girl that points out the window at this boy that just is whizzing by, and there are two people with her. There were other scenes shot, Bob, that
Hmm.
didn't make the final cut. The backstory is that little girl was Lois Lane.
Yeah. Hmm.
The mother was her mother, Miss
Right.
Lane. Whether she was Lois Lane Jr., I don't know. But her mother was Noelle Neal, played the mother of Lois Lane, the little girl.
Yeah. I
And
think she refers to her as Lois, or Lois, sit down and do it,
right,
like,
right.
stop
So
telling stories.
right, but it's really Lois Lane, Noelle
Yeah.
Neal, talking to the little girl. And there was a gentleman sitting next to her husband. Do you know
Mhm.
who that was?
I forgot now. That was so quick.
Let's go back to the very first Superman serial. That gentleman sitting in the train
Is
next
that
to
Kirk?
Noel Neal was Kirk Allen.
Wow. Okay. I had forgotten that.
So there you go. So you had Kirk Allen and Noel Neal,
Oh, man.
who were both Superman and Clark and Lois in the two 15-part serials, and then Noel Neal, who we loved on the Adventures of Superman. But
Yeah.
that's what that special scene was about. And then she later did, Superman Returns. I think it was she was dying or something in the hospital. I remember
Yeah.
it was
Yeah. She
very
did.
sad. And,
Yeah.
and Jack Larson is in that movie also as a bartender, I
Oh,
believe.
okay. I forgot
And he's
that.
wearing a boat. He's dressed like Jimmy Olsen from the TV show. Jack Larson, Jack is wearing, and I didn't know Jack as well as I knew Noel, but
Okay.
Jack was wearing a little bow tie and I think a sweater vest, which is exactly how they dressed him for the Adventures of Superman. I interviewed him for my book, Written Out of Television. It's not a plug, folks. The book's out of print, and if you buy it, I don't get a cent. But it's a good book, and I still encourage you
Well,
to go buy it or take it out from your local library. It's a history of actors and actresses that were in a TV show and left, and they were written out so a new character could take their place, like the Lois Lanes. Uh, Lone Ranger was replaced. Uh,
yeah.
in Cheers, Shelley Long, left.
Well,
Kirstie Alley came in. So it's all about those kinds of things. Anyway,
with I hate to interrupt, but with Hercules popping in here, we may soon have to wrap up, and I don't want to wrap up without first mentioning your other connection to the cast of Superman with Uncle Rob. And why don't you explain
oh
Uncle
yeah,
Rob,
I
Robert Shane, the Inspector Henderson?
one of the nice things about I'm so blessed that I've had an opportunity to get to meet some of my heroes, and not everybody gets to do that. I mean, I became friends with the Star Trek cast when I did Star Trek, and I could call William Shatner Bill and Jimmy doing Scotty, James doing his Jimmy to me, and also when I was doing my research for Written Out of Television, I wanted to speak to some of the Superman actors that were still with us, and I knew somebody uh, who knew how to get a hold of Robert Shane. His name is Jim Nolt. And Jim Nolt runs a Facebook page that you ought to sign up for. It's called The Adventures Continue, Adventures, The Adventures Continue. And it's all about the adventures of Superman, the lowercase, the T. And Jim was able to get me a number where I get a hold of Bob Shane, Robert Shane, who I interviewed because he played Inspector Henderson. And something happened during that interview where we clicked and became friends so well that he said, "Well, call me again next week." And I call him to just say hello. And I call him again. And after a very short time, I was calling him Uncle Bob. So
Ah,
Robert Shane became my Uncle Bob. His wife, who I miss them both dearly, was my Aunt Betty. And I love them so much. And she came out once to New Jersey to visit family. They were living in Thousand Oaks, California. She came out to visit family that was in New York City. And I met her in New York, and she took me out to the Sea Grill for my birthday. A birthday's always been special with Superman.
ah.
And so Aunt Betty took me out there. And Uncle Bob, in an episode, in the black and white episode called Czar of the Underworld, they're trying to find out about murders that were happening at a movie studio. I love that episode because I dreamed about working in a movie studio. I can't believe, Bob, that I actually do now. And one of the things was that Inspector Henderson, Robert Shane, was sitting there eating steak one day, and Kent comes in. He says, "What are you doing, Bill? You're eating steak." Bill Henderson was in it. He says, "Well, I'm on this case and the studio's paying for it, you know? And he loved this steak. Well, when I was making Star Trek, the motion picture, they also fed us on the set, and you could get anything you wanted at the commissary. And I ordered steak every day because Uncle Bob did in Superman. So we got
Oh,
lemon meringue pie, and we got steak from
yeah.
Uncle Bob. And by the way, it was the best steak that I ever had. And that was
Steve, tell us a little bit as we wrap up about what some of your future projects are and your contact information and how people can reach you.
yeah. I am on Facebook, and it's easy to find me. I'm Stephen Lance, StevenLance. You'll see a picture that looks like this. I used to have Clark Kent glasses, so I have them around here somewhere. I always wanted to look like Clark Kent, so I had years ago got a pair of the Clark Kent glasses. I don't know if oh, here they are. My Clark Kent glasses. I used to wear these. Uh, I have them here in
Oh,
my.
nice,
You see
nice.
that? I got that because these don't have any glass in them.
Okay.
And I wore these for years because my mom never let me have these glasses. I had to wear, and I wanted to look like George Reeves, so I got these Clark Kent glasses. And then when I was making the movie with Sam Borowski, who you need to talk to about the creature from the
I
Black
definitely
Lagoon,
do. I definitely do.
Sam couldn't make it tonight. He tried, but he is so busy working on finishing up the bro ship, which I play Billy Palmer, which is Chili Palmer's supposed uncle. And Chili Palmer was John Travolta in the Get Shorty movies. And I'm doing an homage to John Travolta, and I smoke a cigarette like him and speak like him. And Sam is working on that
Uh,
to finish up that movie. But you're going to want to talk to Sam, and especially
yeah,
around
well,
Halloween time
we're
because
both going to see him in October 5th over at the American Legion Post in Tom's River.
in Tom's River, American Legion Post 129,
129.
it's
Yep.
a comic book show,
Yep.
and I will be signing autographs and taking pictures from Star Trek. Oh, by the way, I had dinner at Grace Lee Whitney's house, and she made spaghetti and meatballs. So that was the best spaghetti and meatballs I ever had. The steak I had at Paramount, the best steak, and of
And the
course
lemon
the
meringue
meringue
pie.
pie. Food is part of television with me, and
Yes,
I love this,
absolutely.
Bob, and thank you so much for
Thank you
asking
for
this.
being with us. We'll definitely
My
see you back here again, and I can't wait to have Sam on the show as well. And Hercules, thank you for letting us once again explore another spaced out realm, in this case, Adventures of Superman, one of my favorite shows as well. And of course, you can reach me at usschallenger.org or beamaboard@aol.com. Um, and it's been another enjoyable evening.
By the way, I'm also on Instagram, on IG. It's Stephen Lance II because on Stephen Lance the second because on the IMDb, I apparently there's another darn Stephen Lance. So by the way, I wanted to look like George Reeves with these George Reeves glasses, and then I had to change glasses for Sam's movie. We tried on a bunch of glasses for the character, and these were one of the glasses that they put on me. We didn't use it in the film, but
I
I loved
like
them
it.
so
I like
much. I loved it so much. I said, I want them. And I said, I'm not going to look like Superman anymore. And guess what? Kirk Allen had glasses like these. I still look like Superman or Clark Kent. I still look like Clark Kent. I'm so happy. There you go.
Well, I hope you had. I went before the tonight's episode. Got my another DQ Superman Blizzard from the movie, and just to get me in the mood. And the film, by the way, was enjoyable. So if you haven't seen it, I would advise you to check it out. So
I
Thank you
did.
for an informative and entertaining show. And Steve,
Thanks.
we'll be on soon for part 2 for Superman. And also we will do a Mighty Sons of Hercules show. And if Bob wants to co-host that with me, we have a new show called Pantheons in Pop Culture. So I think that would be a perfect show to put on that.
awesome.
I'd love to come back anytime, Hercules. Thank you so much for asking me.
Awesome. Thank you both and have a wonderful evening. And thanks to all who tuned in.
Bye-bye.
Dun, 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 dun.